Humans are naturally social creatures. In an attempt to strengthen bonds with people far away, we invented social software. Technology and globalization define the 21st century, and we have combined them to create new internet-based communication devices. We embrace these tools, expecting them to connect us with the rest of the world. Yet the very technology meant to achieve this is simultaneously tearing us apart. In our modern era, social software has pervaded all levels of human interaction, causing many people to spend more time on their phones, their computers, their tablets. We asked people in our local community about their personal experience with such devices.
Who in your family uses technology?
All of us. All of my family. Me, my sister, my dad, mostly.
How often do you use it?
Every day, basically.
Every day.
Probably every day. Cell phone, an iPad, Kindle, a laptop.
Every day.
All the time. Laptop, PC, iPhones, iPods, iPads, computer, cell phone, iPad.
Do you think the younger generations get too consumed with technology?
I think they could. And I think that adults too.
Spending too much time on the internet and on our phones limits our view of how humans feel and think. Other than ambiguous emoticons, there is no way to read the emotions behind online messages. This may lead to misunderstandings and unnecessary conflicts, which, in turn, further distance relationships. The vital nonverbal communication that humans rely on, such as body language and facial expressions, is lost in the virtual world. It's much easier to injure friendships online than in person because of the ease of creating misunderstandings electronically, says Dr. Alex Lickerman. He is not the only one that acknowledges the negative ramifications of interacting from behind a screen. Hilary Stout, a New York Times writer, explains that today's youth may be missing out on experiences that help them develop empathy, understand emotional nuances, and read social cues. Children are spending so much time on Facebook that they become more withdrawn and skittish about face-to-face interaction.
You know, I think these things are toxic. Especially for kids. It's just this thing. It's bad. And they don't look at people when they talk to them, and they don't build the empathy. You know, kids are mean, and it's because they're trying it out.
The foundation of relationships is proper and effective communication, which you can't simply learn through Google. Saying something insulting to a person's face may evoke sadness or anger, and frequent exposure to this human response teaches us empathy and sympathy. But on the internet, emotions are not translated correctly or completely. If we were to constantly post negative comments on the internet and didn't see the emotional damage they caused, over time we would become more apathetic about the feelings of others. Blocks us from registering the negative emotional responses hurtful messages engender, which creates the illusion that we're not really doing harm. Underdeveloped interpersonal skills will inevitably lead to isolation. But even people of the general population, those able to socialize effectively, are not developing meaningful relationships. In fact, society as a whole is reporting increased feelings of loneliness. A recent AARP survey reveals that 35% of adults older than 45 are chronically lonely, as opposed to 20% a decade earlier. Another study shows that 25% of Americans feel that they don't have a confidant to discuss important matters with. From 1940 to 2010, there has been a 3,200% increase in professionals who act like makeshift confidants, such as social workers, psychologists, therapists, and counselors. Our web of connections has grown broader but shallower. Within this world of instant and absolute communication, unbounded by limits of time or space, we suffer from unprecedented alienation. We have never been more detached from one another or lonelier. it may be unreasonable to immediately jump to the conclusion that there is a correlation between the increase in use of technology and the increase in loneliness. But a study done by Carnegie Mellon proves otherwise. After studying over 100 people and their psychological and social behaviors during their first years of internet usage, the researchers published a paper called Internet Paradox. Their findings reveal that greater use of the internet was associated with declines in participants' communication with family members in the household, declines in the size of their social circle, and increases in their depression and loneliness. Telecocooning, a term coined by Assistant Professor Scott Campbell and No-Jin Kwok from the University of Michigan, refers to the paradoxical phenomenon in which cell phone users engage in less interpersonal interaction. After conducting a national survey, they found that people who talk on cell phones frequently are less likely to communicate in public. Being separated by a screen makes interaction less tangible. It's not the same as having the person next to you. You can't reach out and touch people across the screen. Physical interaction is just as important as verbal communication in building relationships. Psychological studies prove that geographic nearness, or proximity, leads to greater attraction between people. Social software was invented with the intention of connecting us. But how are we supposed to form relationships when all we do is spend our times with our faces stuck to our screens? Instead of conversing, we whip out our phones. Instead of going out to meet people, we turn to online dating websites and chat rooms. Instead of exploring the world firsthand, we experience it through a screen. Instead of letting the sun shine on our faces, we bask in the glow of LCD monitors. As Dr. Alex Lickerman says, the internet is an electronic drug that often yanks us away from the physical world. In some extreme cases, the isolation extends for unhealthy periods of time. This is defined as hikikomori, a Japanese term used to describe adults and adolescents who have withdrawn from social life and have become recluses. According to the Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, hikikomori refers to people who have stayed in isolation for at least a period of 6 months. The loneliness and social incompetence that they experience makes social networking sites seem more desirable. However, they are deceived in believing that spending time on these sites will ease socializing. In the end, they find themselves in greater isolation. Forums for hikikomoris and people struggling with social anxiety serve as a source of comfort and support, but the mere existence of these sites means that people are less likely to socialize with others without the barrier of a screen. As Stephen Marsh of The Atlantic magazine says, when you sign up for Google Plus and set up your friends circle, the program specifies that you should only include your real friends, the ones you feel comfortable sharing private details with. That one little phrase, your real friends, perfectly encapsulates the anxieties that social media has produced. The fears that Facebook is interfering with the real friendships, distancing us from each other and making us lonelier. And that social networking might be spreading the very isolation it seemed designed to conquer. We can't just get rid of social software. In our modern culture, the internet, social networking sites, and devices such as cell phones play a tremendous role in our lives, a role that is only growing. When used prudently, communication technology can bring people of different backgrounds and cultures together. But next time you pick up your computer, your smartphone, or your tablet, consider the effect it has on your relationship with the people who love you.